Welcome to the Crazy Cool Family Podcast with Don and Suzanne Manning.
A podcast where we share with you great insights about everything family from over 30 years of parenting 7 kids and over a decade of equipping parents through our Crazy Cool Family ministry.
So let us inspire and equip you to build your best family.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Crazy Cool Family Podcast. Today, I'm super excited about doing this. We're going to talk with Larry Fowler. Hi, Larry. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi there. Good to be with you.
Yes, and Larry is the founder and CEO of an organization called Legacy Coalition. And what Legacy Coalition does is they minister to grandparents. It is all about deeply devoted to creating a national movement of intentional Christian grandparents. That's what I'm reading from the website right there. And so today we're going to talk with Larry. Larry has a background. If you guys have ever been with Awanas, Larry was with Awanas for many, many years, right, Larry?
Yeah, 39 years.
Oh, just 39, yeah. Right? Yeah. Okay, how come you didn't go to 40? Come on.
Well, God put a calling on my life and my wife's life to start a grandparent ministry. So we needed to follow him when he tapped us on the shoulder.
Well, so glad you did. And today we're going to talk about the role of grandparents, some of the conflicts between parents and grandparents. And I just think Larry is a guy who talks to, and their staff talks to a ton of grandparents across the country and really encourages them to be awesome grandparents. And so, we'll dive in, and then at the end, we'll let Larry tell you how to connect with them. And maybe you're like, okay, my grandparents need this for sure. We'll talk about how to connect with them. But Larry, first of all, how long has Legacy Coalition been around?
We started in 2016. So we're right at 7 years right now.
Wow. And
8 years.
Yeah. And let's just dive in here. What do you think the key issues you're seeing if you were to say, in talking from and what's fun about this is you're going to be coming from the grandparent perspective. What do you think the key issues are that you're seeing overall between parents and grandparents in this age that we're in today?
Well, the key issues are when there's a lack of harmony between parents and grandparents. That can come because of relational issues. It can come because of spiritual issues. So when the parents are on one page, grandparents on the other, and of course it can go either direction. And then of course there are the different philosophies regarding raising kids and everything that crop up from time to time too. So let's just say this right at the beginning, Don. There are no perfect families.
Right.
All of us have issues.
Right.
Some have more issues than others, but all of us have issues. And navigating the issues from both the grandparent perspective and the parent perspective is really critical.
Well, one of the things that I hear a lot, because a lot of our parents are really trying to follow the Lord, and they're dedicated Christian parents. So a lot of people that gravitate towards this podcast and our ministry. But then they can say their parents are not really as strong of believers. So there are 2 things I hear a lot. One of them is, and I'd like to explore each one separately. The first one is, my parents really aren't believers, and so when I send them to when I send the kids to the grandparents, they're going to watch things I don't want them to watch. They're going to maybe have things, too much sugar or whatever it is that they don't want them to have. So from a grandparent perspective, how do you coach the grandparents on those issues?
Well, we talked to them about, so how do you decide what a good grandparent is? Because I would guess that in the situation like you talked about, the grandparents think they're being good grandparents.
Right, exactly.
By spoiling the kids,
yes.
They think they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because grandparents in, well, not just America, but really Western civilization are more molded by the cultural view of a grandparent than they are certainly by a biblical view. And that's one thing we talk about a lot is we want grandparents to see what does the Bible say about grandparenting so that they align with that rather than the culture view. The culture view is like you talked about, go to their soccer games, or their piano recitals, shower them with gifts, then sugar them up and spoil them and send them home. There's a plaque. You can buy it all the time. They're all over Amazon and Etsy and everywhere about grandma's rules. And some of grandma's rules on those plaques are what happens at grandma's house stays at grandma's
Oh,
house.
right.
And you just get this flavor of their role is to spoil. So grandparents need to be re-educated. And of course it's different based upon whether they're believers or not. But if they're believers, then you want to help them to see what Scripture has to say about their role.
Do you find that, so I know that as a child, many times that you're kind of nervous about going to your parents or in-laws and talking to them about these issues. Do you see as you're talking to grandparents that they're receiving that well? Let's say that they're not a believer and the child their child, which is the parent now, comes to them and says, "Hey, we want to talk about some things where, what the kind of the rules of being at grandma's house, what do you see? How do you see parents being successful in that arena?"
Well, we approach it more from the grandparents. I'm not sure I'm the best authority, Don, to talk about how parents do that. But just family dynamics means that there needs to be some times where you have those heart-to-heart, honest, transparent talks that are, you do everything you can to make them not non-confrontive, non-judgmental. But this really is about the interest, the shared interest for the child, because a child does not thrive when they are under one set of rules one place and another set of rules somewhere else. And so parents or grandparents, whoever initiates this, really needs to make it all about the child. How can you best serve the child?
And really, what you would tell the grandparents is be consistent with what the parents do. With
Yes, yeah.
what I understood from this, what you said is you're not a big fan of we go to grandma's and get spoiled and send them back full of sugar and lack of sleep.
Yeah, I don't laugh at those jokes anymore. They're not funny to me at all.
Right.
We start with this. We start with this phrase. Grandparents, you're still the parent, noun, but you must no longer parent, verb, unless invited. See, the role of a grandparent is different than a parent. However, grandparents, and I'm gonna say especially grandmas here, want to hang on to that parent role. They want to continue to be the parent, and they are the parent, but the relationship has to change to where they only give advice if they're asked. They recognize that the parents are in the driver's seat of the bus and they're in the second seat of the bus. That's really, really critical. And I find that from Scripture that Scripture teaches that, and there's no question but what parents are primarily responsible for the spiritual upbringing of kids, not grandparents. So parents are number one. They're in the driver's seat. Grandparents need to realize that.
So now let's go to the other side of this question. I want to come back to the spoiling deal because I feel like that there's more I want, but I want to go down that path. I feel like that with today's parenting, which is more, let's not spank the child. Let's not, let's be more relational, maybe in some ways, and that a lot of grandparents didn't parent that way and weren't and didn't believe in that. So therefore, when the child goes over to the grandparent's house, you could have the opposite of spoiling, where the grandparent is just on the child all the time. Just the rules. There's a lot of rules going on, a lot of correction, and they again, the grandparent thinks they're doing a good job of helping to raise the child correctly. But yet it's different than when the child's at home in a more maybe quote unquote relational environment. Again, from the grandparent perspective, how do you counsel those grandparents?
Well, my counsel would be, first of all, there's not a prescribed method of discipline that every family must follow. But the thing that will really upset the apple cart with kids is if there's inconsistency. So if the parents are the ones that are primarily responsible and they've said, we want to use this type of discipline. So they use timeouts, they don't spank, those kinds of things. And grandparents said, well, we spank,
Right.
And so you
you
have
turned
those.
out okay, so that's okay.
Yeah, right. But the parents are the ones that have the right and the authority, the God-given authority to choose those things. So what the grandparent needs to do is understand that and then do everything they can to make that system work. So if the system is timeouts, let's make it work. Timeouts can work. And so that's where grandparents come along behind the parents and support them in their chosen way of disciplining. And we know many times parents aren't consistent in the discipline, and grandparents see that. So when they see, for example, a mom telling her kids, if you don't stop that, I'm going to put you in timeout. And 5 minutes later, if you don't stop that, I'm going to put you in timeout. And if and they're inconsistent in it.
Right.
Well, separate between the inconsistency and the discipline method. So you, as a grandparent, you want to make the discipline method work. And that of course, really means consistency. Consistency is the key.
And so we've talked about a couple of different things where there could be differences. One where the grandparent spoils the child and, just believes that that's what grandmas are all about or grandpas or whatever. And we're about, sweets and donuts and, and whatever it is and just going. And that's different than saying, maybe they go on trips with the grandparents or whatever, because there's more flexibility of schedule. It's kind of a different thing. But the other thing is just, so the other thing is when the grandparent is a lot more strict. And in both situations, what I'm hearing you saying is that you would counsel that grandparent to more line up with the parents. And
Yes.
so therefore it seems like to me that from a parent perspective, that's a great way to communicate with a grandparent is, hey, it's best for our child if we're consistent.
Yes.
And so
yes,
from
that's the door. Yes.
from a parent perspective, that's exactly right. The door into the grandparents could be, yeah, I want to see, wouldn't you like to see consistency? And do you find that grandparents receive that consistency appeal pretty well, or do they? I mean, I just see these grandmas and grandpas that want to spoil their kids just rising up against you and saying, Larry, no, I worked so hard for this. I want to give this kid sugar. Come on.
Yeah. That's why that's not where that's not our starting point, especially with Christian grandparents, because we start by helping them to understand they have a biblical role in the raising of kids. We talk about Deuteronomy 4:9 says, teach your children and your children's children. You have a 2-generation responsibility. You're responsible, but in a secondary capacity, you're still responsible for the discipleship of the youngest generations. And, in an ideal family situation, there would be 6 adults, all devoted to the spiritual growth of a child. Grandpa and grandma on one side, grandpa and grandma on the other side, besides mom and dad. And like I said, families are messy, so that's not very often that's all intact, but that's still the biblical model. And so everybody is responsible to do it, but the parents are to lead.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's a biblical principle. That's very clear from, Ephesians chapter 6, that the parents are the ones that are in the lead. So grandpa and grandma need to hear the message that you're not in charge. We talk a lot about how do you influence, and we talk with grandparents about the fact that when they were parents, they had the authority, the biblical authority, and the right and the responsibility to control their children. But when their children go out on their own, they give up control. They are not to control anymore. And when the children establish their own family, controlling, they don't do it. But influence comes through relationship. So what do you do that injures a relationship, or what do you do that enhances the relationship? And when grandparents have conflicting methods in their house compared to what the parents want, then what they do is they injure the relationship, and that diminishes the capacity for influence.
How do
And
you,
so,
yeah, how do you counsel grandparents? So, many of times that we're seeing things from the view of the parent and needing to talk to the grandparents or whatever. How do we, or maybe they choose to limit the visiting of the grandparents because of these things. But so if a grandparent is struggling with some of these issues with their child, how do you counsel them to go talk to their kids about these things?
we talk about uh, approaching from the perspective of grace, giving grace to your adult child. It's just natural, isn't it, for us to see the other person and their fault. It's Jesus' message about seeing the log. You don't see the log in your own eye; you see the speck of splinter in
Mhm.
somebody else's eye. So we talk to the parents about, or grandparents about, you may need to go and say, what have I done to hurt you? What have I done to offend you? Please forgive me. And offer forgiveness first, because you may be blind to the things that you did. And until those things are dealt with, then the door probably isn't open for reconciliation.
Right.
Reconciliation is incredibly important.
Yes. Yes. And so really what you're saying is go in with a humble heart, which is probably good advice for the parents too, going to the grandparents, is not going in so heavy handed of you're wrong, I'm right. And so yeah, I was just curious, I bet you've talked to a lot of grandparents that are trying to reconcile those things with their kids and therefore their grandkids. So yeah,
Well,
besides that, what are some other ways that they're successful in that?
Well, let me just tell you. I'll tell you a quick story.
Yeah.
Stories usually help. We had a grandma about a year ago that listened to what we share, and she had a daughter that had been estranged from her for 20 years. In fact, the daughter had gone through um, counseling where she was actually helped to disengage from her family. And so the daughter went through this elaborate process to completely cut herself off from the grandparents at this point. And the grandma, who is 80 years old, um, said, I always saw her as doing that, but she listened to our message of asking for forgiveness first, and she was able to get word to the daughter, and her very first words are, "Please forgive me." And to make a process, sum it up real short, within about a year, they were completely reconciled. The relationship was restored, the family was restored, but somebody had to take the step first and say, "Please forgive me." And "please forgive me" are incredibly powerful words to reestablish a relationship.
Oh, awesome. And so that's amazing. And so I think, one of the things it's like trying to get that consistency, trying to pursue forgiveness and healing in the reconciliation and relationships, uh, taking a little bit different turn here. So, how do you see grandparents dealing with the technology of today? And how do you how do you guys handle that with them?
Very frustrated. My wife and I were in a small group when we lived in Illinois, and it was in a retirement village, Don, and we were not of that age yet. We were in our mid 50s at the time, and we were the youngest in the group. But one of the lady that hosted the small group was telling everybody about her 10-year-old granddaughter that would come over to her house and just be on her cell phone the whole time.
Right.
And she kept telling her, get off your cell phone, get off your cell phone. And finally, she's relating this. She said, if you don't get off your cell phone, I'm going to take you home. And a little bit later, she was on her cell phone playing a game again. And the grandma took her home. And I thought, oh my, that sure did a lot to enhance the relationship. but the grandma wanted the granddaughter to enter grandma world and sit at the table and have tea and talk. If the grandma would have instead had the strategy of, I'm going to enter granddaughter world for a little bit, and shown an interest in the game that the little girl was playing on her phone, which was just a game, and said, tell me about it. What is it? And showed an interest in that, she probably would have been very successful in getting the granddaughter to sit at table and have tea with her afterwards. So we talk about, you've got to enter grandchild world.
So
you have
good.
to show an interest in them. So we have 3 grandsons. We have 7 grandkids, but we have 3 that live a mile from us. They are 8, 10, and 12. And they love video games. My wife, who has zero interest in video games, will sit down with them and say, tell me about this game. Now, that's also a good thing. The kids just light up when they do that. They want to tell grandma all about the game that they're doing, and they love showing it to grandma. It also helps us to be watchful for bad things that they're engaged in. So we talk about that. We've partnered with people to talk about the difference between video candy or screen candy and screen vegetables. And by that, I mean, there are things that we want them to watch on screens that are really good and healthy, like vegetables. And then there's screen candy. There's stuff that if they eat too much, it'll really become sick. That comes from a lady named Arlene Pellicane that's written a book called Grandparenting Screen Kids.
Wow. That's, those are 2 lessons. One of the first one in particular, we really talk about with our parents a lot, of being interested, being what we call being immigrants versus citizens in the technology world. That our kids are citizens, we are immigrants, and we act like immigrants to ask about how they are immersed in the culture. We are a little bit outside of that culture. So I love it that they ask questions about it, and really from grandparents. Then those kids, oh, grandma, here we go. It's even almost like playing the role of letting them be the teacher. And and letting them, have authority, if you will, in that realm where they're comfortable. I love it, and especially when you talk about enhancing relationships in that way. Well, Larry, I think that this has been really good. I mean, I feel like that. You're coming at it from the grandparent side. It's interesting to me that you say, hey, it's not about spoiling the kids. It really is more about being a godly, there's a biblical model for being a grandparent. And I love it that you guys are challenging grandparents, because they have a lot of influence, right? I mean, even though culture and technology is going this, I'm sure you're finding that grandparents, if they do it, especially if they do it right, still have a lot of influence in the child's life.
Well, they absolutely do. And they certainly have the potential for influence that's second only to parents. if they will leverage it and use it. And one of our passions is, though, that church leadership never thinks about equipping grandparents.
Hmm.
And Don, if you thought, okay, how many churches in America have leadership that thinks about equipping parents? Virtually all of them would think about it. They may do it, they may not do it, they may do it effective, may not, but they all think, well, we should help parent. But just as it's almost 100% would think about it, almost 100% of church leaders in America don't think about equipping grandparents. And yet here they are, they're second only to parents in their potential to influence kids. Way more than any youth pastor, way more than any Sunday school teacher, any
Yeah.
Awana worker. Yeah.
And so if a church does become interested in that, do you do it through? So let's talk about, as we wrap up here, let's talk about your ministry, Legacy Coalition, and how do you guys, you're like us, I'm sure that you serve people directly, but you also work with churches and other ministries as well. Tell us a little bit about Legacy Coalition, how people can connect with you guys.
Yeah, well, we have a webinar every Monday night called Grand Monday Nights that they can jump on and participate in. We have different speakers every week. It's on grandparenting and all sorts of topics. We have a couple hundred videos in a library from previous episodes that touch about everything that you can think of. We do seminars. We do the only national conference on grandparenting. The next one will be a year from now, in early 2025. But then we provide churches with resources for small groups and classes, and certainly resources for individual grandparents as well.
Well, great, great ministry, great idea. How'd you have the idea to start? You said the Lord led. How did you have the idea to start Legacy Coalition?
Well, in 2012, we moved. The Awana headquarters. We were on headquarters staff. Is in the Chicago area, but we just had a passion to fulfill what we were seeing in Scripture. So my wife and I moved from there to Southern California, where we live now, for the express purpose of living close to our son as he was starting his family and being involved in them. And so we were given other positions from what we had at the headquarters, but still on staff. And I would travel around the country, and my role was to be kind of a coach or a consultant for children's pastors and megachurches. And so I'd go into these churches, and now these were churches that had about every ministry imaginable for families. They had divorce recovery and single mom care and premarital counseling. They just had it all. But as time went by, they would ask, so why are you living in Southern California? And I would tell them my grandparent passion. And then I started asking them, so has your church ever done anything on grandparenting? And Don, 100% of them said, we never even thought of it.
Right.
And these are some of the biggest, healthiest churches in America, but they had never thought about equipping grandparents. So I said, well, somebody needs to do something about this. I didn't think it would be me. I really didn't. But then the day came where God called my wife and I to lead the charge to start this ministry.
Well, Larry, glad you're doing it. I think it's a very valuable resource for people. And so it's legacycoalition.com. And Larry will give us anything you want. We'll put it in the show notes as well, so you can look at that. But legacycoalition.com, look up their resources. They do have a great meeting on Monday night. And so really just encouraging parents. I hope our parents are encouraged to go talk to their parents to go have these discussions, because grandparents are a great resource we're enjoying that as we have our grandkids now, being able to have influence in their lives, and just to create just like we created a special place in our home for our kids, we now get to create Yaya's house. This is where, they come. It's not Pops's house, it's Yaya's house. But,
Sure.
but it's a great place for them to come. And we go there too. I'll end it with this, parents. One of the things that from a grandparent perspective, and so, we have 7 kids. And so lots of activity going on, and now 6 grandkids. And a few years ago, I just decided that I was going to embrace the chaos. So that was my mantra. I said, so many times I think grandparents try to put structure. They want their lives to be this structured. Oh, I'm through raising kids, and now it doesn't ever go away, really. And in fact, it multiplies. It's different. It's more seasonal, and it's for a few days and then they go. But I just encourage, if you're a grandparent out there listening, just I love what Larry said about lining up with your kids, and then also just embracing the chaos and embracing the relationship. And you really can have a great impact on all the generations. I love it that you said multiple generations. So anyway, thanks for being here with us, Larry.
You're welcome.
And I love your ministry, and I hope that some people will get in touch with you as grandparents and parents to learn more and more about how to include the grandparents in the family. So thanks so much. And as always, parents, go be crazy, crazycoolfamily.com.